What's up, folks? Internet friends, pandemic goers, survivors. Dr. Michael Moeller, aka Dr. Mo, here, sitting down with my good buddy here, Dr. Sam. What's going on? You're off the grid. You're hiding.
Yeah, I'm hiding out in Montana in the mountains.
Got out of the crazy Seattle stuff, huh?
Yeah, we escaped a couple times this year. We left in right after they kind of called the pandemic in March 15th, and then again recently, right when before the forest fire smoke got really bad on the West Coast, and then it crept over here last week, and now it's just cleared out in the last 24 hours here.
I was kind of wondering that. I saw like Tina Moore too. I know she was in Portland. I think she went down to like Vegas to escape the smoke. And then it's like, it probably followed you over there, didn't it?
Yeah, I came over. We were paddleboarding on a lake here. There are a lot of lakes around us. And by the afternoon, we were just hanging out on this lake. You could barely see across the lake to the mountains across the way. And it got really bad, pretty bad, especially in the evenings.
Yeah, just sucking down some glutathione nebulized or?
I never felt like it got bad enough that I thought about ordering glutathione, maybe last Friday, but I never felt like it got bad enough to do that. Like I never was working out real hard outside or working outside long enough to need glutathione, I think. So I was taking a bunch of other herbs and stuff because I was exposed to somebody who had COVID. So I was taking a bunch of astragalus and extra vitamin D and all that stuff, and I was fine, and I tested negative for COVID, so that was exciting. Kind of a little
that makes one of us.
Yeah.
I got it when I got it end of July. I woke up, man, it was one of those things that I've been feeling out of it probably since the pandemic hit, just because like my schedule's off, you're not going to the gym, you're sleeping, all your schedule's weird. So it's hard for me to tell. I was like, man, I'm feeling a little bit off, but is it the COVID? And I had body aches one night pretty bad. And I also I've had kidney stones, and those have really kind of come and go. And I had a 14 millimeter. So I got a big sucker in there, which I got lithotripsy. That's a whole nother story. But for me, I had like pretty bad body aches. I had a little bit of fatigue in the afternoon, and then I had real bad body aches at night. And I was just like, man, I worked out real hard today or something. It's one of those things I didn't know for sure what it was. And then the following night, I had terrible kidney stone pain. It kept me up all night. And then I had a fever of it was like 99, like just, something going on. And then I waited, and then the next day it went away. So I was kind of like, I isolated. I stayed away from people. I wasn't really sure what was going on. I had to cancel a birthday party. But then I had a lithotripsy scheduling the following Friday. And then I had to get tested for that on a Wednesday, and I tested positive. So I did lose my smell and my taste. But besides that, maybe a little bit of a cough. It really wasn't, probably because my vitamin D is optimal, sitting 50, 60. So you've seen those studies that are coming out now, huh?
Yeah, I think they had finally an RCT released about vitamin D helping prevent people getting COVID and decreasing the severity when people get COVID. So
yeah, their outcomes, right? I think that's why the one I saw was on outcomes, that people with higher vitamin D's way less, and the people that did have terrible outcomes, as far as death, they all had like terrible vitamin D's. And then I think Paul Anderson shared something about the glutathione deficiency, like having low amounts of glutathione and outcomes or something.
Yeah, glutathione, vitamin D. I mean, I don't want to.
Our basics.
It's all the naturopathic basic stuff that I think that we've all been kind of quietly screaming about, because we basically had a gag order on us since this whole pandemic started. And
have you noticed some censorship? I mean, I did a video on supplements that I said just to boost immune system. It wasn't even particular for this, but it got taken down.
Yeah, I've stayed away from YouTube, not because of censorship, but just because of, busy enough. doing everything I gotta do, running a clinic, responding to patients, keeping up on prescription orders, all the stuff we do. And so I've been meaning to get more involved with YouTube, but the more I see people getting, like Brian Rose has talked about, like if he has one guest say that they hate their sister or brother or something, he'll be deplatformed because that's considered hate speech.
Jesus.
On YouTube, right? So he is that close from being deplatformed, not even video censorship. And I've had conversations with people on Facebook about censorship and, is this basically a breach of our constitutional rights and freedom of speech? And everybody says, well, they're private companies, they can do what they want. However, they're getting taxpayer money.
Yep.
And since they're getting taxpayer money, if they're editing and deleting things, then they are actually a publisher. Technically, legally, they're a publisher, not a free space where people are, basically getting their data mined and advertised to, so they can share what they want on these social media platforms. So social media companies are taking taxpayer money. They're $billion+ organization companies, and they're also mining all of our data, like everything we like, everything we don't like, everything we post, all the videos we watch. So it's kind of concerning to me that they become more of a publisher, and they've deleted Facebook groups. They've deleted, you're talking about, they've deleted some of your videos on YouTube. And that's concerning to me because once you get an organization that's that powerful, basically controlling the narrative, you basically are controlling people's minds. The media controls the mind, right, of the public. And while some of the people in the public may be smart enough to read between the lines, I think a lot of even very intelligent people just don't dig deep enough for whatever reason, and they believe a lot of what they've been told, whether it's through mainstream media outlets, through the documentaries that they choose to watch. And we've talked about this in the past, but it can really disrupt things in a not great way. And I'm all for disrupting the mainstream, but it looks like they're towing the line of the mainstream of whoever their puppet master is pulling these strings. And that is very concerning to me because, I mean, even if we go back to like the idea of nutrition and what we should eat, there was a documentary that came out, Game Changers, I think last fall, right? So like, I don't want to spend too much time on that, but since then, I've had so many of my patients say to me, my husband or wife now has decided that we are going to eat plant-based. And I'm like, well, you can eat plant-based and you can still eat red meat, 2-3 times a week and not become anemic, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so. And so it's concerning to me that, as it always has been, the people who have the money call the shots, and there's definitely a narrative that they want to be heard, and that's the only one they want to have heard, and there's no like say in it. It's just, okay, we're going to take that video down. And the fact that now Dr. Fauci has said, oh yeah, I take vitamin D. And like, after how many people have died?
Where was this, like 6 months ago?
So it begs the question, do these people actually generally care about, and not just people, but organizations, whether it be Facebook or YouTube or the US government or other governments in Europe or other places, do they generally care about our well-being, or are they being paid to basically shut people up who are trying to actually help people who are nutrient deficient? Because we're in the US, we're not calorie deficient like they may be in a place like a third world country somewhere else. We're nutrient deficient, and we're like the I think it's upwards of around 50% obesity.
Yeah, it's getting there.
40 to 50% metabolic syndrome. And that's all low testosterone and hyperinflamed individuals. And those are the people who are dying of COVID.
Yeah.
And, you know, we saw in the media that they're doing studies on giving men estrogen.
I wanted to bring that up. Yeah, there's a big, they were saying for a while, guys with higher testosterone and the androgen receptors make you more susceptible to COVID. So let's just block the receptor, right? Like not thinking about what testosterone does for your immune system, not what it does for your energy, for your sex drive, for your, you know, to make you work out and all these things. It's kind of like, they're just missing it, you know, and to be honest, it reminds me of kind of where we're at with like the policing state, you know, like the Black Lives Matter versus the, you know, Blue Lives Matter and all that. It's like we're arguing at the wrong level of analysis. You know, we're arguing over police brutality when the argument should be like, how did these people with mental disorder, you know, people get depressed and then they go and they're on drugs and then the police brutalize them, right? Like let's take this like 10 steps back, and that's where our medicine comes in. And I think it's kind of the same thing when we look at, you know, YouTube and Instagram. They're selling at this point, and I'm very libertarian-ish at the end of the day. I want people. I'm a classic liberal on any way, shape, or form. And I think YouTube, private company, it can you know refuse service from whoever I want. But at this point, number one, they're taking taxpayer dollars, and two, they're a monopoly. And that's I don't like the government doing much at all, but their job is to get in and break that stuff up. Freedom of information, freedom of medicine. You know, technically, you should be allowed to pick a naturopathic doctor as your provider and not be discriminated against, especially from a governmental standpoint where there's taxpayer dollars. And like you're saying, what we see is that certain people get into places of influence and then they kind of, they push their agenda forward and both sides, because you saw that with Australia. They went on some super lockdowns, and there was a lady there that on Facebook, I think she created a group to make a protest, and they came in and arrested her. And I think that's terrible and crazy. And they did a clickbait ad where like, woman who is arrested dies inside. And I was like, what? It's like, it meant that she died naturally, and mentally she was dying inside. You know, they were hyperboling. And that's what I'm saying. It's happening on both sides, where we're just in such a clickbait world anymore that on Facebook and Instagram, you need to post something that it invokes fear or anger into someone. And it doesn't even become about the message of anything. It's more of like, how much of a response can you get? And we're seeing that take a toll, I think, especially from like a mental health standpoint with all this stuff going on right now, smoke, protests. And it's just like, you know, we need to really step back and take a better look at a lot of this right now.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about the mental health aspects of social media and even just consuming too much media, you know, if you listen to TV and the nightly news, which I don't, but if you do, you might want to stop, especially during this whole thing, because I think it's really toxic. And, you know, the media I call it basically a reality TV show because it's their version of reality.
Oh yeah.
It's not what's really happening. For example, in Oregon, I think there was 1 million acres that were on fire 2 weeks ago.
Climate change.
And and the media, and yes, I do think the climate is changing, and I do think as a species we have something to do with that, and it would probably be happening without us, but maybe not to the degree it's happening, for sure.
And we can do things to prevent it. I'm with you on that, right? Yeah, we need to take care of the environment.
However, at least 5 to 7 of these fires in Oregon and some even in California some were started by lightning. But what they saw in Oregon in particular is that I have friends with close family members there, and they were people were throwing car bombs into cars. They were throwing Molotov cocktails into homes. They were throwing them all along the side of the highway. And forest fires don't usually just go up I-5, you know, they don't travel I-5 north and then just go away. And there's the guy who actually even posted a video from his house, and he was like, my town in Oregon's evacuated. The wind is actually coming towards my home. And he said, if you look down there, you see the burned area, that's where the fire, but the fire didn't go where the wind would have pushed it. The fire went up I-5. And if you know anything about fires, usually the wind makes them worse and spreads them into the deeper into the forest, or if they're in a forest. Very strange that these fires were, there were people who are paying these arsonists who, some of the convicted, 2 men who were convicted were, you can look them up on Clackamas County, Oregon Sheriff Department's website, and they were meth addicts. These 2 guys were anyway. And I think some of them were already on parole and criminals. So they were, paid to do this by who knows who paid them.
Going down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's very suspicious. So what happened after that is then you see all these headlines about, well, climate change should be a topic of the presidential debates because it's election year and everything's crazy around election year, especially this year. Again, climate change is real. However, these fires were not started by climate change. Were they probably worse than they would have been because there were poor forest management, or temperatures were above 100 degrees for a week before that? Most likely, yeah. I'm sure more land and homes burned than would have if it was done in the middle of winter in Oregon, where it's usually rainy in Western Oregon. But point being is that, like, I shared some of these stories on an Instagram, and I had people who are in the healthcare industry say things like, climate change is absolutely at the cornerstone of this. This is a huge issue. And then I just gently sent some of these videos to some friends, and they're like, yeah, humans are like, if you look at it, humans are always causing the fires because of climate change. And I was like, well, yes. However, do you know that these fires were started by humans? A lot of them in Oregon were started by people on purpose. Same thing happened in Australia last year. So last year, I think 23 of the fires were started by people all over the country of Australia. And that came to light later after a lot of the headlines immediately just jumped to climate change, which, if you think about it, that's not a very scientific way to do investigative journalism, where you say, okay, what actually caused this? Let's figure this out, instead of just trying to get something out there that's clickbaity that will get us and sell things. It's all about selling things and selling advertisements and getting the viewership. And so this is what's happened. And now it's, I have friends who, their family homes are gone. People are homeless, and people are still like, well, it's climate change. And it's kind of, can you imagine losing your home and watching fires being started, or your neighbors watching fires being started outside their homes, and then people are saying, oh, well, we got to do something about climate change? And
it's like,
you were there and you saw these fires being started, or at least you saw the results of them, which were catastrophic for you. How infuriating that would be to you. You must feel like you're crazy because you saw everything happen in front of you. And meanwhile, all you have to do is go to these counties in Western Oregon and Central Oregon and Medford and around kind of Eugene area north, and just see that, oh, it's all started. These were mostly started by people throwing.
Well, and I think it's the simplicity of the human mind to take something that's multidimensional and simplify it, right? Oh, well, it's climate change, or it's X, Y, and Z. And to be honest, it's kind of like the COVID thing. Like what you're saying, the effects that it had on our country wouldn't have been as bad as if everyone wasn't immunosuppressed, and in a terrible way. Hopefully this comes out right. One of the things with forest fires is that we've been trying to prevent them for so long that we've allowed so much dead material to accumulate. Forest fires used to happen all the time. It's just part of the science. I think a lot of the sequoias and the pines, you actually need a fire to, I think, let the seeds out of the cones or certain things.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's a natural. Yeah, and it's a natural process. So when we allow those things to accumulate, maybe climate change is part of it, and then you get some uneducated person. It's kind of like the person would be the actual virus, or the lab or wherever it came from, and then the susceptibility of our culture is kind of like that extra stuff, the extra material we have allowed. And when we allow people to live such, and I'm not trying to force it on anyone, but it's just it creates a perfect storm. right? And you just can't pin it on one thing. But from a naturopathic perspective, what do? We look where the dis-ease is. We look where the cause is. We don't look like, oh, there's fires everywhere. You know, what we look at the previous step. No, we need to go like 10 steps back.
Right. Yeah. What's the root? What actually started all of this? And yeah, and I know for California, people were saying that if they listened to the native tribal people there and they used the land management practices that they have been doing for a long time, you know, for forever in California, the government of California decided not to do controlled burns as much. So that's what they got this year is they got nature saying, well, if you're not going to do controlled burns, we're going to burn down like 3 million acres, you know?
Yeah.
And that's devastating. And the governor was basically saying like, it's beyond, we need help, but it's beyond the phase of getting enough help. And then at that point, it wasn't 1 million acres yet. I think it was almost 8,000 acres where he said we're beyond the state of getting enough help where we can deal with this. My neighbor's brother, I think, lost a home in Central California from those fires there. So it's affected a lot of people. And I mean, I've lived in places where there's fires for, you know, a long time now, almost 20 years in the West, in Arizona and Washington. And I know people are on fire crews in Arizona and Washington State. And a lot of the money that goes from the federal government and state governments towards fire is about protecting people's homes. When you hear about a lot of people losing a lot of homes, you know, that's serious. I mean, obviously it's serious, but there's a lot of efforts that were put into place before this to prevent this from happening. So, you know, maybe controlled burns would be a thing of the future now, since they weren't in the past. But I mean, it's kind of like, you know, a lot of things we do to bring it back to medicine and naturopathic medicine, like adaptogenic herbs for optimizing your hormones. What those herbs do is they basically, it's like working out. They prime your body for that stressor. So when you're under that stressor, similar to a controlled burn, it's not such a big deal for your body, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of the things we do, whether it's like hot and cold showers or cold shower every morning, it's priming your body so that when your body's under other stressors that may be similar, your body says, oh yeah, we've done this before. We have this biological flexibility in our system, so we can handle this, you know? Mm-hmm. What's happened is we're such indoor creatures. We're so comfortable now at the thermostat's at 70 degrees all the time.
Yeah.
You know, we're eating, you know, Dunkin' Donuts or donuts in the morning with our coffee. And then, you know, we're eating whatever we want the rest of the day, and Subway or fast food burgers. And, you know, the county I'm here in Montana, I see a Chick-fil-A line and McDonald's line when I'm driving through town, always wrapped around the building. And this is during a pandemic when we know those foods cause obesity, when you know those foods cause inflammation and heart disease and low testosterone, and then they close the gym. So people are, you know, you don't need a gym to work out, but it definitely helps keep people on kind of a schedule and a routine. And when you close the gyms, then people gain that extra 30-pound plus COVID weight potentially. And now
the COVID-19, I hear they call it.
Yeah, the COVID-19.
19 pounds.
Yeah, and now they're higher risk for getting a more severe outcome from this virus. So it's and then the stress eating, you know, if you're watching the news and you're paying attention, and the media is definitely pushing their agenda of fear tactics around this, and then you stress eat. So it all kind of snowballs out of control from there. And so, yeah.
Well, and two, I think it's somewhat of like, it's funny that the year is, you know, 2020, right? Like 2020 vision. There's so many things that I think for the first time we're seeing, like when we want to talk about metabolic syndrome and what it's doing. For the longest time, you think, okay, you know, you get diabetes and then that's life. And, you know, it increases heart disease, Alzheimer's, dementia, and you know, we have poor outcomes, and, you know, we'll just get nursing homes and we'll just extend life. We'll put them on more drugs. And then when you see something like this virus, it's like, guys, we're totally missing the point here. You know, it's kind of like working out just to look good. And that, yeah, that's great. Boost your confidence and everything, but we're missing some of the other important aspects of health in general. How more resilient you are when you're healthy like that. You know, number one, like me getting the virus, and who knows, maybe I had a different strain or what. To me, it wasn't that rough. I'm 31. So yeah, I'm 31. I'm matched by the doctor. I hope that if I get it, I have a good outcome. And we can't try and make too many excuses for people why they couldn't have been in a similar circumstance like me when it came. Right. And so if you have those things that make you so resilient, the poem, oh man, there's, it's not Robert Frost. And I can only think of one line, but there's a line in it, and it talks about like in times when things are good, build up resiliency, because those are the things you're going to have bad things happen in life. You're going to have 2020s. Like that's part of the game. My 2020 has been super rough. I opened up a new clinic in January, ended a relationship. I got COVID. I had kidney stones, and then I had a lithotripsy to blow up the kidney stone on a Friday, after I waited 8 hours for the machine to get there because the tech didn't have the proper TB test and the hospital wouldn't let him in. And then by Sunday, Saturday night, I was vomiting out of the pain was so bad, and I ended up back in the ER on Sunday. And I'm not trying, my dad had a terrible bout of pneumonia during the COVID. Like, things happen. And it's funny because we want to empathize with people, and that's great as humans. And we have an amazing ability to be resilient. And, it's kind of like a nation's born stoic and it dies Epicurean. We develop, and we forget too, a Freudian quote about that. In retrospect, the years of struggle is what's going to be the most beautiful and the most fun. Right. But we've tilted so much more on the get out of jail free cards, the McDonald's, more of the superficial happiness, I guess is the best way to put it. And we can see that, yeah, nature's going to eventually bite back. And I think that too has to do with, the way our cities are forming. And you look at Southern, California in general, and how much it blew up and how great it seems to have been. And then, same thing with Seattle. Now people are scurrying out of there because they've realized that this way of living is no longer sustainable. And we need to figure out definitely something new. That's something I've asked you multiple times since you went out to Whitefish. I have never been up there, and I keep telling them I need to, and I think I would love it. But I'm like, yeah. Are you gonna go back? Are you? What's your? What are you gonna do? Yeah. I'm sure you're feeling the same way that Joe Rogan left and Shapiro's leaving. Like, people are getting at the West Coast. It seems like people are trying to look for something new.
Yeah, I heard a stat today that 40,000 people from mostly all over the West have moved to Montana this year.
No way.
Really?
I believe it. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically since the end of February.
Wow.
Beginning of March, and 10,000 of them have moved to Flathead County, which is where I am in Whitefish.
There's probably 200,000 people in that county? Is it that big even? 100,000?
Less. Before this, there was like 90,000.
Wow. So, Jesus.
Now, yeah, it's a big growth.
Yeah.
So it's changing the culture here, and the locals aren't really too happy about it.
Oh, yeah.
I think that a lot of people that I talk to, whether they're friends or patients or people like you, are saying this has kind of been a great awakening, and they're realizing, like, I don't really like the city life. I was just here for work, but now I can work remotely. Yeah. So the company says as long as I stay in the US, they don't care where I go. And a lot of companies are saying, you don't have to come back to the office if you don't want to ever, or we're definitely until January 2021, we're remote until further notice. And I think it's going to be hard for a lot of these companies to say, like, everybody has to come back to the office, especially a lot of these tech companies on the West Coast. And people are moving, and they're, transplanting themselves out of, their box of an apartment or home, especially if they're having to squeeze themselves and their kids in there now all day long because their kids can't go to school during the day like they used to. And a lot of people are realizing, like, hey, we need a yard, and we want to be close to nature, and we want a different quality of life, which is very expensive to have in a city like Seattle, LA, Portland, any city on the West Coast for that matter, and probably East Coast. So what does that do is it pushes everybody out into the country, and then they can get a house that's affordable with a yard.
Half their rent now becomes a mortgage payment. And that's been the hardest part for me. I'm from Southern Illinois, and my hometown has 3,000 people in it, and it's the biggest town in the county. So, people there are for my rent right now, they're having a mortgage on a 3-bedroom house. Right. Exactly. So that's been something I've definitely struggled with. I do a lot of in-person visits now with I've integrated with a medical doctor. I have a nurse practitioner. So I'm doing, treating a lot of neuropathy. You're in Orange County, you have someone with neuropathy, specifically Medicare, have them come see me. And with that being said, though, a lot of, naturopathic stuff, it's one of the same things. You can do it remotely. Where's your practice kind of been at with that? Most people doing remote at this point?
Yeah. So last year I was going more towards remote before this even happened. I do in-person visits if I'm going to do any injection therapies, whether it's PRP or prolotherapy. I mean, I've been moving more and more away from that because of where my clinic was located in downtown Seattle. A lot of people didn't want to drive in from the suburbs for visit. Yeah. So it was kind of my patient demographics pushed me more towards remote. And then when I moved out of Seattle to the suburbs a couple of years ago now, just got too much being around homeless people 24/7. And I mean, I've worked with that population and I definitely think they need a lot of support, but
yeah, that's the tough part about it, right?
Yeah. Feeling like if you go and take out your trash and recycling in the middle of the night, that you might be jumped in the rain and dark in Seattle, and it's unsafe after sundown, which in the winter in Seattle is like 4:00,
Yeah.
So
yeah. I've never thought of that.
Nighttime. So basically, long story short, I continued to poll my patients, and the majority of them just said, hey, we really like doing telemedicine, and, if we have to see you face to face, we will, but we prefer not to. So that's the way I was already going. And then COVID happened, and it was like, hey, I'm 100% telemedicine. And everybody was like, absolutely, that's fine. So that's where I've been.
Do you think that I have a little bit of a worry with that again, it kind of, how much of this increases the social divide? How much of naturopathic medicine, and maybe that's more of what, the elders always said that, we don't do physical exams anymore. You don't even physically, touch the patient, pat them on the back or listen to their heart. But I mean, I don't know, it's tough in general. Like, us here right now, we're doing a podcast over Zoom instead of in person. But it's just weird. The whole world's moving that way. Just like, I'll order Starbucks or whatever, and it's like, I don't even talk to the person. Put my order in, go in and grab it and go. I literally have been going to the bank to deposit checks that I get just to like go out. It's like we're getting in such like we've traded convenience, and we think time, money, Tim Ferriss, 4-Hour Body, what's the most effective? And it's like, what's the point of life? Right? Yeah. Like, connecting with other people and being human. So that's something that it's concerned me just a little bit about, even in particular our medicine.
I think it's really concerning. And I mean, I do most of my visits, if I know for sure, let's say a guy has a previous lab test that says like he definitely has low testosterone and he has all the symptoms, and we do like our first visit over telemedicine, then I'm always saying, if we're going to prescribe testosterone, we're doing a physical exam once a year, bare minimum. So all those guys have, they're getting a first visit. But for follow-up, for, not just convenience, but if I'm in Seattle and they're in Montana and we already did a first visit, then follow-up is usually telemedicine. Mm-hmm. I mean, I definitely prefer in-person. And for me, I think in Seattle, it was like everybody was like, why are we all just driving to downtown? And then when we can just get on the phone, and if I need to get you a lab kit, I'll meet you at like Starbucks in the town between our two towns. I don't have any issue. I don't think I'm breaking any HIPAA or anything like that by just meeting someone and giving them a lab kit, or just have it shipped to their home. But
Well,
yeah, I like having a physical exam. I like getting vitals. I like looking at body language and seeing like, okay, you know, they said they're feeling this, and you know, what is their posture, their vitality, the way that they walk into a room, and you know, how's their body posture and their body language convey their mood, because there's a lot you can tell in the first 30 seconds by just greeting someone. You know, do they have a firm handshake? We're not shaking hands anymore, so you can't tell that either.
yeah,
So,
I still do. I push the limits on all that, on the mask, on hugs, and I feel like we almost have to. Otherwise, we're going to stay caged up in this weird situation we're in. So, and
yeah,
and I mean,
we're
I think
touched upon culture. So
yeah,
before COVID, we were. I remember taking like a massage class in undergrad, and they were saying like all the research around like lack of touch, decrease oxytocin, if you want to bring it back to hormone health, you know, if you can, like, hug more, you know, get a massage, have more therapeutic touch that's healthy, you know, have more sex, all those things. But with this kind of fear tactic machine, it's like, don't even hug your family members.
yeah,
I've even seen, you've probably seen this too, where it's like, if with your significant other, have sex with your mask on. Like, yeah, that sounds fun.
yeah. What's
You
the
probably
point?
are like making dinner with your wife or significant other, girlfriend or whatever, without your mask on, you know, but wear your mask. I was just like, and really the research around mask is, I mean, I think that if the one time that I would wear a mask, you know, if this wasn't going on, would be more with the forest fire smoke, you know, because of the size of the particles.
Yeah, the particles of the virus are tiny, and to me, to be honest, I'll make more of an argument for the actual placebo effect. The people think they're healthy, or they think they won't get it. But yeah, and you know, when this first came out, I remember I looked up some CDC and the WHO back in 2019 said that wearing a mask has little to no evidence preventing the virus infections. So then all of a sudden, I remember when it all started, it was so weird how quickly that happened and people started arguing. And I'm like, is this even a discussion? Like what? And then all of a sudden it became like mandated. I'm like, there's no science for this. Like, whose science?
Right.
And everyone's like, it's proven in science. And I just like, let me go on PubMed. Oh, the science says it doesn't work. I'm like, where's this?
Right.
Who's in charge of science anymore?
Yeah.
So, and then you get tarred and feathered when you say it, you know, and it's just like, you asshole, you want people to die. I'm like, no, I don't. I want people to live long, happy lives and be free.
Well, I think it goes back to the same ability for people to truly be investigative scientists. And, you know, when we're talking about the forest fires in Oregon, and it's like, well, climate change is real and climate change is the reason of this. And then it's like, well, masks always work. And it's like, well, you know, maybe if you sneeze inside of a mask, less droplets are going to come out into the air, and, you know, maybe someone won't get sick because they won't walk through that sneeze in the air that they can't see 1 minute later. But like, maybe in that case, if people aren't able to sneeze into their elbow or something, which, by the way, sneezing into a mask is disgusting if you've ever done it.
Yeah. I thought about that when I'd be like walking around the store. I'm like, I gotta sneeze. I'm like, do I take I was going to take my mask off and sneeze. I'm like, but that's why I'm wearing the mask. I'm like, oh, it's like on my face now. Like, I don't think this is any healthier.
It's so gross. It's disgusting. Yeah. It's like, I don't even know what that would be like.
It's nasty. It's straight what it is. You're just covering yourself in your own body fluids. It's like, I'm okay.
It's like if you had to pee your pants to prevent someone getting sick or something.
You pee in your own pants, all right?
Yeah.
That's the rule. The science has proven it. If you pee in your own pants, prevents disease.
This bad disease. I mean, and then there's the other flip side of this, which is to reach the state of immunity 70%, and Dr. Tina Moore has been sharing a lot of this on Instagram. 70% of the population has to get the virus. right?
Yep.
Whether it's through a vaccine, which the vaccine trials look horrible.
Terrible. Yeah, lots of side effects. I've only seen a little bit. They do not look promising at all. And they've never been able to they've been trying to make a coronavirus vaccine for a long time, and they've been very unsuccessful.
Yeah, they had the one trial with the SARS CoV-1, the actual SARS virus, and they gave it to ferrets, and then they exposed the ferrets. They showed the ferrets got immunity from the vaccine. The ferrets were okay. Then they exposed them to the live virus, and all the ferrets died.
Yeah, I remember at least a couple of them. I was like, this doesn't make it. The whole thing just doesn't make sense. And I'm not saying I know the answers. I'm just saying, like, y'all saw I Am Legend, right? Right? I Am Legend. Like, we have a cure for cancer. Let's give it to everyone. And then they all turn into zombies. Now, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. And I think that there's a time and place for pharmaceuticals. And I'm not saying that all vaccines are bad, but to rush the clinical trials, and that's when you get into hydroxychloroquine. You know, one of the things that I have discovered is that in order to rush a vaccine through is that they need no proven treatments. And because there's no proven treatments right now, we can rush the vaccine through it. And for those people that don't know, the Childhood Protection Safety Act allows any vaccine that's created to have complete immunity from legal obligation. So if you create a vaccine and you give it out to everyone and everyone gets hurt from it, they can't sue you. They can only sue the government. So that's an absolute gold mine. The vaccine, creating a vaccine, you're good to go. And again, and I get why they did it. I'm not saying they're all evil, but that's when you have an intention of something that gets totally warped, twisted, and bent. And I love capitalism, but there's also, like every system, there's going to be negative things that we have to watch out for. And then people come in and they take advantage of that. And we at least need to be able to question it. That's when I get so frustrated with a lot of these things. Humans are definitely infecting the environment. You have to be blind not to see the city of Los Angeles is like, it's like a huge beehive, right? So that is doing something to the environment. How much that's affecting the temperatures and stuff, we can debate into that. But then they're like 99.99999% of scientists agree that the world will be melted in 3 years. It's like, who are these? You know, it's just that becomes the peer pressure, right? And it's like, let me just, and it's what sucks is that we just can't even have discourse anymore. And I'm not trying to be, anything that I've said on this podcast, I'm happy to have a debate with someone. And hopefully I learn something I don't know. I know I'm pretty stupid.
Well, I think that's where people learn too, is like in high schools, there used to be, I don't know how it is now, but there used to be debate teams, and you would be forced to debate something you didn't believe in so that you could think critically around the topic, and you basically know both sides. So when you're ready to debate, you can debate whatever topic comes up. And I think that has been lost on us, where people are just like, I believe what I believe and it will never be changed. And I mean, there's been things in my so far short medical career here where things, and when I was in medical school, I was like, yeah, definitely don't know about HRT. I'm definitely never telling a guy to put testosterone cream on his scrotum. And, that's not what I do. Yeah. So, and I was like, I don't know about cannabis. I think, can probably help some people, but I don't know about all these medical cannabis things. And, I worked in medical cannabis clinics for 2 years.
In high school, I debated against the legalization of marijuana. I remember being against it. And now I'm like, I don't really use it. I could care less, to be honest. I think it's like alcohol or anything else. Just be careful driving, be responsible with it. And, and I do think there are plenty of medicinal benefits. I really like CBD more than I like THC, but there's a time and place for it. Just like there's a time and place for opiates or antidepressants or any of those things. Those are the kind of discussions we need to be having, not just throw one under the bus. And I think on the other end too, at least I would say early on for me, and I'm still at fault for this, I like to win, right? So I want to debate the vaccine and I want to win when really the goal should be the right outcome. That's one of the things with Ruth RBG, passing, with the Supreme Court justice, I think is going to be pretty wonky. And I'm more conservative than I am liberal. And in that sense, like from a government, I would agree with more probably in conservative. And I think it's almost would be a bad idea to put another conservative. It's like, that's when we have to sit back and look and again, and put the ego to the side and be like, yeah, we may win, whatever you want to say, but it's like, is it what's best? Right. And we don't think that way anymore. It's kind of like you've been in a relationship where you want to win the argument all the time. Like if you're in an argument with your partner, you don't win ever. Like you don't win, right? Like especially as a guy, you're not gonna, if you win, you lose. And if you lose, you win, you know, you lose. And if you win, you lose. Cause it's going to come back one way, shape or form. So it really comes down to, you know, intellectual dialogue and hopefully learning something and moving forward.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a valid point. And then, I mean, the history of the vaccines going back, at least from what I understand from my research, and in 2009 during the swine flu pandemic, I had a pro-vaccine safety blog on a Google blog, and Google took it down.
Really?
So that was my first experience with censorship. And soon after that, well, 7 years later, Google signed on, Alphabet, their parent company, signed on agreement with GlaxoSmithKline, which is a major pharmaceutical company. And Google had been fined for like fraudulent sales of prescription medications. So their Alphabet, their parent company, had said like, well, let's have this multi-hundred millions of dollar deal with GSK, who's been convicted of fraud and all these things. And, you know, they make medications and vaccines and things like that. But what happened in the 60s with vaccine companies, or these pharmaceutical companies, is they weren't making any money because all the fines were eating up all their profit margin for side effects from their vaccines. And they came to the government and they said, hypothetically, if someone bombs us with anthrax, with biological warfare, we need to have an anthrax vaccine that is just ready to go and fast-tracked. And there's not going to be any issues if someone has a side effect. So that's kind of where that law came into place, under that like potential biological warfare threat.
For our safety. It's like the Patriot Act, or the, you know, that's how they do it though. It's always the Childhood Safety. It's like Save the Children Act, Save the Puppies Act. And it's like ends up like they're murdering puppies for like their dog food to save other puppies. And you're like, who, what?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And the No Child Left Behind Act. And then all these kids were screwed over by the and stuff like that.
It's like more child got left behind. Actually.
Yeah. So the government said fine. And then what happened is the vaccine companies they've been in the clear, as you mentioned, from people. What happened with the first set of swine flu vaccines that they released is that people got Guillain-Barré syndrome.
Yes.
So basically it's like a form of, it's a neurological disease, like their body's basically paralyzed in some way, and they can't walk like a normal person ever again. So
well, I think they can. It depends, right? I've heard
some
that
of them
with
hear it, some of them don't.
Yeah, I think
some of them
I forget
don't.
what the actual outcomes are, but I had a friend who's a physical therapist, and there's a big questioning about just the regular flu shot and Guillain-Barré syndrome, right? Yeah. So the myelin sheath deteriorates, and you need that for your nerve conduction. And then, it basically puts you in a wheelchair for a couple of weeks. You got to learn to walk again. And I don't know. I don't remember if the outcome. I think it's pretty good. I think most people end up getting it back, but I think you're right that some people don't. So it's like, do you want to? And you should know that. Like, okay, if I get a flu shot, it's going to decrease my chance of getting the flu by, let's just say 95%. Just throw a good number out there. And you have a 1 in 100. Yeah, really, it's like maybe 10 or 20%, maybe. But really, would you do that if you knew you had a 1 in 100,000 chances of like not being able to walk for a month? Like, no, like I'll take and in the flu's, trust me, flu's not fun either, but I would rather risk having the flu for 2 weeks than losing neurological functions for 4 to 12 weeks. So, and I think that's a conversation where, you know, maybe that's where I'm more classically liberal. Like you should be able to decide when you look at it. And unfortunately with the masks and everything, it just becomes in vaccines, it just becomes more of a herd, the herd thing. Right. But I mean, who needs
I think it's also, I think what you're talking about is very important because it's the informed consent. Informed consent is it's the law basically.
I got one for you. How many
whenever there's
guys
a
have you had that
treatment out,
have permanent ED because of prostate biopsy? Have you ever seen any of them?
no,
You haven't?
from prostate biopsy,
Yeah.
or prostate removal completely.
Well, from both. I've had them from a biopsy.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen it. I haven't seen it from biopsy, but I've seen it from the prostate being removed.
Yeah, and they don't tell him. Like, guy had no idea. I saw him like 6 months later. He's like, he came in and said, "Hey, things aren't working down there." I'm like, "Hey, going through his history." He's like, "Yeah, I had my prostate removed 6 months ago." I'm like, they kind of told you. He's like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm like, that's probably what happened. They could snip the nerve. Like, I don't think we completely understand what's going on there. But do you know what the statistics are on that? It's pretty, is it 10-20% of guys they get ED from removal?
From biopsy, I don't have
Not
the stats.
biopsy, just, I'm saying even from removals.
Oh, from prostatectomy. I think if they're doing the surgery the way that they used to, I think it's less now with the Da Vinci robot. So I think it's better now with that. But basically, like in anatomy, you have this nerve plexus down in the pelvis, and it's like a spider web. So they're just gonna rip that up to get to the prostate. It would almost, it's like you have to get into this small area, and then there's a spider web right before it.
Yeah.
You're doing surgery, you're going to rip up that nerve plexus. So yeah, you're going to have permanent ED. And yeah, informed consent, it's legal. I mean, essentially the way that we learned it is you always do a PAR-Q for every treatment, every visit. People sign informed consent to sign up with their doctor. Usually people don't read those forms, but the informed consent is like, hey, if I'm going to do even just a testosterone or B12 shot for you in your glute, you could get a bruise.
Yeah. Cellulitis.
Or cellulitis. So, infection. And the same thing with pellet therapy. Those people should be getting told like, hey, you could get an infection, you could get cellulitis, you could end up in the hospital. This could go really bad if you get an infection from this minor surgery with pellet therapy, and people are getting that information. So I think all across the board in medicine, everybody needs to do a better job of informed consent and spending the extra 3 to 5 minutes just educating the patient. Like, hey, by the way, the past 3 years, flu shot for most healthy adults has been around 38%, 36% efficacy. That's what it was in around 2017, 2016 for the flu shot. You can look that up on the Cochrane Review database. And, it's up to you if you get the flu shot or not. And, you probably can just make sure you're sleeping more, exercising more, and taking vitamin D and keeping your immune system optimized with vitamin C and the nutrients that it needs so that it can actually deal with this infection when you get it. And I think one of the biggest debates that I've heard that was a big debate back in 2009 during the swine flu pandemic now is, and maybe most people don't know about this, but is the germ theory versus more of the terrain theory. So, you have, I think it was like Antoine Béchamp, and then you had Louis Pasteur, and they basically were like two scientists that were on the opposite end of the spectrum arguing that if the body is healthy, then doesn't matter what infectious agent it comes into contact with for the most part, as long as it's not like the plague, most people are going to live through that. Whereas, if the body is breaking down, if someone's really sickly and elderly and they get the flu, they're going to die of pneumonia. So a lot of the conversation that you hear in the media right now is that it is because Louis Pasteur essentially won and got a lot of the political backing, because I think he was also a politician. And as happens in science, is once you get the political and money behind you, pushing that narrative, that's the one that won. And that is what we're hearing now. And it's people are like, oh, if you're not going to wear a mask, then you're killing my grandma.
Yeah.
And I've even seen people share things on social media, which is just horrible, where they're like, if you're not going to wear a mask and you're willing to kill my grandma, then I'm going to come punch you in the face and shoot you.
Yeah. You're like,
And it's kind of like, whoa, weren't we trying to save people here? You know, it gets a little off the rails.
Yeah.
So there is, I think I think there's validity to both. They're both theories. So the germ theory is still a theory, but people act as if that it's scientific fact, right? Because in medicine and in science, we have theories that have to be proven by going through scientific studies. And, like if you could have like 100 people exposed to Lyme disease through tick bites, and maybe, I don't know, let's say 30% get chronic Lyme disease, and the rest are able to be treated with 2 weeks of doxycycline, which is the gold standard that they say Lyme disease is treated for 2 weeks with doxycycline, and then you're done. And then you don't have Lyme disease anymore. So maybe 30% of those people will get really sickly and have chronic Lyme disease for the rest of their life. And there's no conventional treatment because they say, based on their theories, that that's what that disease needs. So the problem where the germ theory becomes problematic is where it becomes like this gospel, where now we have people who have forgot to conveniently mention that vitamin D is helpful, that vitamin C is helpful. And I mean, at least in China, they were saying, don't go to the hospital, stay home, use Chinese herbs to stay out of the hospital. If you were in the hospital, get your Chinese herbs when you get home. At least they were saying that. Here, there was no integrative approach. There's been there hasn't even been people saying, okay, well, how does hydroxychloroquine work? Oh, it's a zinc ionophore. What does zinc ionophores do? They help push zinc deeper into the cell so that the cell can function better in the immune system. So just taking zinc gets it outside of the cell into extracellular space. Well, what other things are zinc ionophores that don't have the side effects, or what dosage can we give hydroxychloroquine to people so they don't have side effects? Okay, there's a lower dose that you can give. You can look it up on PubMed. Wow, that's awesome. Let's give it to people with zinc who are high risk, with vitamin D. What are the other things we can do? Oh, vitamin C, so the list goes on and on.
Well,
of things that we know that can help the immune system. And a lot of people are like, well, this stuff costs a lot of money. And it's like, well, 2,000 IUs of vitamin D doesn't actually cost that much.
Well, and how much is it going to cost to put someone on a ventilator? How much is it going to cost? People are like, well, don't give hydroxychloroquine because there are negative side effects. Do you want to die? You're so scared of this thing. You're like, oh, okay, well, this is going to kill. Well, why don't you try? Why don't you? I think is it heart disease? Hydroxychloroquine's heart. I don't.
Yeah,
remember.
it causes some issue with arrhythmia in the EKG. You can see some. Yeah. I think it's like a QT elevation or something.
Overall, it's a very from my understanding, a lot of autoimmune, mostly lupus, arthritis. It's been used. So if you're in that should be a conversation. If you're in a population risk thing, you talk to a doctor like me or you, and the person comes to me and wants to use it, I should be able to give it to them. And that a lot of the compounding pharmacies and pharmacies in general were starting to refuse orders because of that, because they just, from their other, I don't know if there was their philosophy or whatever. They're like, well, I'm not going to fill it because I think this is dangerous for the patient, which doctors or pharmacists have no problem filling tons of opiates and other mitochondria toxic drugs all the time. So it's just so weird how, everything's become so politicalized this year. It's like, Jesus, like step back.
I think we need to get big money out of politics and get big government out of medicine and politics out of medicine.
Good luck, man. We're going the other way. I mean, that's kind of the Medicare argument when I was in school. I'm in a real double-edged sword with healthcare for all. I mean, I'm a doctor. I got into medicine because I want people to be healthy, right? Like, is health a right? I think it's kind of like a lot of the other areas. Is marriage a right? Is a relationship a right? Is a home a right? I don't know. I think that we would have a better world if everyone had those things. Whether or not it's a right is a completely different conversation, and I don't know if we have the tools to dissect that. And when I was in school in California, we're not covered by insurance. So why would I want Medicare for all? Because then why would people come and see me when they could go see someone else for free? We have that with insurance right now. Someone's like, I'm paying $800 a month, $1,200 a month for a PPO. I'm not going to pay $300 to come see you. I'm going to go see my other doctor. So
Yeah.
it's a deeper question. We're arguing about Medicare for all. And that was just we had a lot of philosophy in school. And I said, I don't want Medicare for all. We're not involved. Someone literally is like, you want people to die, don't you? I'm like, what? Like, that's why would I leave my home? I traveled 2,000 miles. I left my hometown. I'm $250,000 in debt because I want to kill people. Thanks.
Right.
But that's where
yeah, I'm definitely not an expert into Medicare for all and all that stuff. But what I have seen, and I interviewed Sean Needham, who's owns a compounding pharmacy in Central Washington in Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy, and he wrote a book called Sickened: How the Government Ruined Healthcare and How We Can Fix It. And one of the biggest issues is that people are just not healthy. And when we have more Medicare, when we have more government mandated insurance and things like that, it actually makes healthcare more expensive in this country, not less expensive. And there's a lot of insurance fraud with Medicare where people are like, just getting oxygen because Medicare covers it, and they're not even really using their oxygen tank. And it's like $300 a day billed to Medicare or something. And when that oxygen tank would be like, you could probably buy it and fill it for less than, $300 a month, and you could own it. You could own the whole thing for less than $300 and then fill it for probably like pennies. So the point being is that it's very expensive. And that's why I actually really gravitated towards the direct care movement, which actually came from the allopathic community who are trying to get out of the hospital system, which the hospital system is run by people with MBAs who are trying to make a ton of money off of the doctors. And the doctors are basically slaves just working their hearts out for in the system, 7-minute visit, 30 to 40 patients a day. And I believe that because I have a lot of doctor colleagues who are DOs and MDs, and I know that all of us went into this to help people, and we all have big hearts. And I think if someone was like, hey, we'll take care of you. You have no loans. Here's a house. Here's everything you need. Here's like a food stipend for being a doctor. Everybody can see you for free now. I think a lot of doctors would say, okay, cool. Cool. Like I don't need to pay back that debt. Like the government ate it because I'm giving a service to my community, and my community's healthier because I'm here and I'm providing this service. However, that's not the system we live in. And
you went to fantasy world there for a little bit, Sam.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
But what we do see is that, since Obamacare came into effect, since people are pushing like this Medicare for all thing, is we are not Germany. We are not a Scandinavian country. We're not that size. We're a massive country, way sicker population, which I think this pandemic has shown in spades how sick we are as a population. And hopefully the silver lining of this can be that it's a wake-up call for people to say, you know what, like, I'm going to walk more. I'm going to take vitamin C. I'm going to eat more vegetables. Like, I'm going to take care of myself so that I'm not a liability. I'm not a walking heart attack, a ticking time bomb. And, if you need medicine, go and get the medicine you need. And the benefit, going back to direct primary care movement, instead of that medicine being $250 every time you refill it, or $175 every time you refill it, it's $15.
Yeah.
Or instead of having someone sit down with you to go over, a nurse or a doctor, how to use a glucose monitor because you have diabetes and you need to know how to check your glucose every morning, instead of that visit being, billed to your insurance for whatever it is, and then they don't cover all of that, you're on a monthly membership for like $85 a month or something. And
Wasn't it funny too? You spend like for a PPO or most insurances just in California, you're spending most families at least 500, probably 800, $1,200. A gym membership at most places is like $30 a month. LA Fitness 24 hours. So you're telling me that we can't take 6% of your insurance payment and insurance can't cover like a gym membership? And even like you said, from a personal trainer standpoint, just 4 times a month, it's like once a week. It's like, we're not even thinking about those things though.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the lifestyle component to health is, finally getting a little bit more mainstream airtime and limelight, where, when I first started seeing a naturopathic doctor in the late 90s, to eat vegetables was like, what are you, a freaking rabbit?
Yeah. Yep.
And now it's becoming less of like a hippie thing, whatever that means. But it's less of a fringe thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm hopeful that more and more people, I mean, it may not be 51% of the US population anytime soon, but more and more people will start saying, okay, like I'm going to eat more vegetables. I'm going to try going without gluten and dairy for 2 weeks and see how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try eating more protein before I eat more of these like cooked baked goods,
Yeah.
So I think there's hope in all this. But yeah, going back to the Medicare for All thing, I used to be in the camp for Medicare for All, but when I saw when I've seen when people have, how do I say this without sounding like
Funny, because I know exactly probably what you're going to say, and it's tough. It's I won't say privilege, but when you come from a place like everything's free and then you're just taken care of, like there's a lot of obstacles that come with that once you give. And it's just like a library card or anything else. It's like, do people use the library, and do they respect it well? And that's unfortunate, is that there is a level of like, when people pay, they pay attention. That's one of the things with our visits. You're spending $300, $400 an hour. People are like, okay, I'm going to get the most out of this. Where you're saying, oh, Medicare is covering my oxygen tank. Oops, I let it run out today. That's $300. I got to get a refill, which is that money. So it's a double-edged sword, right? And that's like anything. That's like welfare. There are plenty of people that need it, and it has a good heart and has a good intention behind it. And then unfortunately, some sinister son of a bitch comes and finds a way, like, oh, I can sell 10,000 oxygen tanks a day and let my patients use them more than they can. And I had a doctor interview me. I applied for a job, and he wanted me to come over and take his practice because he was going to jail because he was selling wheelchairs to people that didn't need them. And they were like $50,000 wheelchairs. So he's like, every person that came in, like anyone, he made like millions off of selling these wheelchairs. I forget how many he would sell a month. $50,000 is a lot of money, and they cost him like, wasn't even close to 10,000 or whatever. So it just sucks, like there are always things that pop up. And then, kind of like with Obamacare, we have to be careful about what steps forward we take, because you can't always move backwards, right? Like Obamacare, I don't think is going away. And even if there are really sinister problems, that's really, in my opinion, the communist Russia or fascist Germany thing is like, once you get too far, it gets pretty catastrophic. And I'm not saying, that's why I get extremely cautious, especially in the socialist area. Again, I think there are a lot of theories that come from that I would love to implement. And one of the problems, just like the mask thing, if I'm going to wear a mask, I want to wear it, if someone's like, hey, sir, I'm a little uncomfortable, I'm scared, can you wear a mask? What sucks for me is I've had it. I'm not going to get it again, and I'm not going to give it to anyone. So what's the point of me wearing one? But if I'm walking, I'll still wear one out of respect from other people. But it's also different when someone comes up to me and is like, you need to put your mask on. Put it on now. Like that takes away the genuine part. It's kind of like the welfare argument. It's different too. I think that one of the things I've always really wanted, I think it'd be different that if we took part of our check, and then maybe once a year, you got all the money that the government asks you to give to welfare, and you went to a family and you gave it to them. whatever way, shape, or form that in. Instead, we're just so removed from it. And at the same point, then it becomes a way like, hey, Sam made $1 million last year. He should give $100,000 to the poor. Instead of you like, you know what? I made $1 million last year. I'm gonna give $100,000 to the poor. How much different is that energy? And when the government starts intervening and enforcing you, it's not as, that's coercion. That's not goodwill.
Right.
So, and the Medicare system becomes all that energy just gets entangled when the government gets too embedded. And they said the hard part about our crony, well, and our things are pretty good here. I don't like ripping on the system too much because I'm still damn happy. I'm living in California. I can complain about it all day. I can complain about America, but still, my opinion, best place to live. A lot of problems that we need to work on and fix. And there's a difference between just bitching and finding solutions and talking ideas to help kind of fix things. So
Right.
I don't know if I took the words out of your mouth or you had any other thoughts on Medicare, but that's kind of what I've seen.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of fraud and abuse there. And at the same time, I do have family members, my parents in particular, who I've talked to, and my dad's a military veteran, was in the Air Force, and he says that Medicare is better than the VA hospital, and it's a better system for him from what he's experienced. So, I think that for a lot of people, it's been really, really great, and they're not abusing it, and they're just using for what it's for. And and I think my experience with things like HMO hospitals for conventional medical system kind of stuff. I had a knee injury in college skiing, and everything was taken care of when I had an HMO. It was like I didn't ever saw a bill. So I think that there are good systems out there, and for what they're used for. However, if people could start taking care of themselves better, work on the lifestyle stuff, and invest in their health like they invest in cars or homes, and look at their bodies as like, holy shit, like I can get a new home, I can get a new car. Those things are material things, but it's really hard once your body's very sick to reverse a deeply seated disease process and pathology in the body. So it's, like if you want to look up like organ costs, for example, like how much all your organs would cost if you were to buy them individually, like maybe you need to put a price tag on your body, and that works for you. Yeah, it's like kidney replacement, heart, all this stuff, and your brain. And I think a lot of people don't connect the dots between like, holy shit, I eat pizza every day and I drink a 6-pack of beer every day, and I haven't like lifted a weight since I was in high school football after I injured my back or whatever. So they're not putting 2 and 2 together, and then they wake up when they're 55 and they're like, oh, I'm taking a statin, I'm taking blood pressure medication, I haven't had an erection for 2 years and I feel like crap, and this is regular aging. And it's like, no, that's inflammaging, and you have metabolic syndrome, and you're going to die a shitty, horrible death that you could have prevented if you had met with the right person when you were 40 or 35. So I mention that because all the people we see and we talk to every day, they're investing in their health. And yes, it's not a cheap thing, and I recognize that not everybody can afford that. But even if you just put like $900 a year into your health, or $500 a year into your health, it would make a bigger difference the next year. And I mean, I've talked to people who are just like, hey, like I'm doing intermittent fasting, I'm doing a water fast once or twice a month, I'm going to my doctor and using my insurance and doing the basic routine labs, and I got a gym membership. And the next year they're like, I lost 30 pounds and I never even had to pay that much money, because it's like you said, gym membership's what, like $35?
Yeah.
If you go to a fancy one, maybe it's $65, but that's like once a month. I mean, $65 isn't even a dinner for two in any city on the West Coast.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of this is this kind of like cognitive dissonance between, oh, well, insurance is going to pay for everything, and so I shouldn't have to pay for that. So I'm going to spend my money on doing all the fun things and it goes back to our comfort zone. And we need to be less comfortable to make changes. And the more comfortable we are, I think the sicker we're going to get. And I don't mean like uncomfortable where, you have so much pain in your body you can't sleep, but I mean like psychologically comfortable. Where it's like, oh wow, I'm paying $300 for this appointment. My skin's in the game. I'm doing this shit. I'm going all in. I'm gonna work out. I'm gonna lift heavy. I'm gonna get on testosterone therapy, or I'm gonna get on Clomid or HCG or whatever it is, and I'm gonna do all this stuff that this person says to the T because I trust them and we are actually working together in a partnership. Versus, when you go to a conventional practitioner, it's like, okay, well, your cholesterol's high. Here's statin medication. Come back in 6 months. And there's no, what we were talking about earlier is like having the in-person visits. There's no doctor-patient relationship there. No. There's no like, hey, this person actually cares about me.
How many patients have you had? They'll say this to me when they do. I would say maybe 10% of my patients, I'll be talking to them and they're like, oh, I have a great relationship with my primary care doctor. And it's funny because they make a note of it as in that it's a weird thing, right? Like, oh, I have a great relationship with my doctor. I'm like, shouldn't everyone have a great relationship with their doctor? Like, he's your doctor, your health. It's like, you would hope that becomes like an intrinsic part of your life. And a lot of what you're saying, I remember hearing this story.
Right.
Yeah. There's a story though. Imagine that you had like a random uncle, cousin or whatever, kind of like, Mr. Deeds. Like, say that you just had a random person that you long story, you inherit a $3 million racehorse, right? Are you going to take that racehorse and feed it Doritos and Papa John's? And are you going to just stick it in a terrible place? Or are you going to get it a good trainer? Are you going to give it great food and have it exercise? Right. And then you're like, oh, well, I definitely do that. I'm like, well, aren't you worth more than a horse? Like, and that's $1 million. Like, I think the story used to be like 100,000, which is still like, but when, just kind of elaborating on the fact that we'll take, like you said, your car, how much, I'll pay $500 car payment, $150 for insurance, $300 on gas. I get it washed twice a month for X amount. You'll spend $700, $800 on a car and you won't pay $30 for a gym membership or $300 to see you or me, or $500. I don't know, whatever. I'm paying $450 to see an ND next week for something. So I think it's worth it.
Right. Exactly. And, going back to the car analogy, most people who are overweight, have metabolic syndrome, low testosterone, haven't had an erection for a long time. Maybe they can't remember last time they woke up with morning wood, for focusing on men's health here. They may be obese or just overweight, which is also a concern for your health. And they're spending $550 a month on a car payment. And then they're like, well, I'm only going to see a doctor who takes my health insurance. And it's limiting their ability to move forward with their health. And the thing is they're already paying, they're going to have to pay way more than they would ever have to pay with us if they get very sick. If you've ever had to get a hospital bill, even just going to the ER for an emergency visit, but if you've had a heart attack or you've had like a TIA or stroke or a family member has, like, those bills are huge. So point being is that I think a lot of people aren't tuned into actual cost in medicine. Maybe they haven't had those bills or family members who've had those bills. And so in that retrospect, naturopathic medicine, functional medicine, integrated medicine is very, very affordable. And I think we have a huge, huge problem in this country with materialism and the advertising and the media and everything, telling people that they need to live off of credit cards and they have no savings. And the average American, I think last time I heard, maybe this is like 30 years old stat, but dies with less than $1,000 in their savings account. So we have a huge, huge problem. It's not just about like minimum wage. It's in a quote unquote living wage. It's that we have been conditioned, all of us have been conditioned, most all of us, to think like, okay, well, I need to have a new car, or I need to have this kind of car to like fit in with these people, or I need to live in this zip code, or, you know, have this house, and I think if people look at their values and what they truly value, and the question is, are my actions congruent with what my actual values are? And if you value all those things and you can afford them, that's fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with having nice things and being able to afford nice things. But if you can't afford to keep yourself healthy and go to a doctor and pay, you know, $300 every 3 months or every 6 months, because that's what you need, because your values have become so materialistic that your body is less important than appearing a certain way in front of people that maybe don't even actually care about you. Or maybe they do, but point being is I personally think that is sad. And I think that is why a lot of people are depressed, is because they thought these things would fill this void inside of them, this black hole. And it's just never going to happen. Like, that house is never going to make you truly happy. That car, maybe for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. But, you know, I know people that have a lot of money and they'll rent a Ferrari or something, because they know that they actually are going to keep more money in the bank and in their investments and their assets if they don't have that car, you know? And I mean, yeah, there's people that can afford it, and that's awesome. Like, good for you. But that's not what I'm talking about. I think most people, it's like, okay, well, I want that truck that's 50 grand. And then they're like, well, I can't afford to actually take care of myself. Yeah. And, you know, of course I'm biased, because this is what I do for a living. And I've invested probably over $100,000 in my own health. And I don't think everybody needs to invest that amount of money over 20 years, but, you know, as we say, pay now or pay later. So either you're going to pay later in life, and we all are basically sitting ducks if we don't do anything for our health. If there's no inputs into the healthy category on it every day, on a daily basis, for days on end and years on end, then we go more towards the inflammaging and the metabolic syndrome and the heart disease. And that's, like, statistically, most all of us are going to die from Alzheimer's or neurodegenerative diseases, dementia, or heart disease, so heart attack or stroke, or cancer, or Western medicine is going to kill us, and a surgery is going to go wrong, or they're going to give us the wrong cocktail of medications in the hospital. So statistically, that's how most of us are going to die. And personally, I don't want to be a statistic. Like, no, that's not where I want to go. You know, I'd like to go in my sleep if I could, or I'm
crazy. I want to go out like my parachute doesn't open, or like, I knock on wood. That's not, but if I'm going to go, like, it was funny. I had a roommate in college, kind of weird. And, but I said kind of the same thing. We were just talking, and real strange guy. There's a lot of weird stuff that we talked about. And we were talking about how we would prefer to die. He asked me that random. It's probably within 2 weeks of meeting him. It was, like I said, pretty weird. I said, I don't know, like in my sleep, like when I'm old and I have grandkids and I just saw them after a birthday party, and then I just pass away. And I said, what? He goes, he goes, you only get to do it once. Wouldn't you want it to be like something super exciting? And I always thought he was crazy. And then I kind of thought about it, and I was like, it would be, and that gets into the more hero part for me when you'd watch, like, you know, was it Batman? At the end of Batman, he like takes the bomb out and then he dies supposedly, but, you know, like for a good cause, right? That's Braveheart. Every man dies, but not every man lives. And we all die. Yeah. It's just a matter of how and why. So, unfortunately, we gave our lives to naturopathic medicine at this point. But right. I know we're running a little long. We'll probably put this on. I'll put this on my podcast and your podcast. So I think most people kind of know where to find us at. What's your handles? Instagram?
Yeah, my Instagram is Dr. Sam Madeira, Doctor Sam Madeira, Madeira. So it's kind of long, but I think I'm the only Dr. Sam Madeira out there on Instagram. Or if you just probably put in my last name, it should pop up.
They'll snag you. There's like, if you go on like LinkedIn, there's like 30 Dr. Michael Moellers. I have people, there's one in LA in Studio City, and people are like, wow, what do you do in Studio City? I'm like, not in Studio City. What's your, yeah. What's your, what's your clinic?
Clinic is Apollo Health Clinic, APOLLO Health Clinic. So Apollo.
Cool.
Apollo
All
Health
right,
Clinic.
we'll wrap up with a message of hope. You know, like it's been crazy, like 2020. Like I said, I'm hoping at least gives us kind of some vision here on a health part. You know, kind of waking up to basically everything we talked about was the philosophy of, you know, getting at the disease, and we can prevent a lot of what's going on here. I think a lot of people got to get over their bitterness and resentfulness, and then take your life in your own hands, like you were saying about the car payments and the house payments and stuff, and change your lives, people, and we can change the world. So
Absolutely.
signing off. See you guys.